She thought she was untouchable, a billionaire's fiancée with unlimited power. But when she decided to destroy an innocent woman's life, just for sport, she had no idea she was sealing her own fate. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it demolishes everything you thought you owned. If you love stories where justice prevails and bullies get exactly what they deserve, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious karma, and let's dive in. I never thought a simple coffee run would change my entire life. My name is Violet, and 6 months ago, I was just another struggling software engineer trying to make ends meet after getting laid off from my dream job. I had exactly $43 in my checking account, 2 weeks left on my rent, and a laptop that was held together by hope and electrical tape. But I still had my dignity, my work ethic, and a stubborn belief that things would get better. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting in Meridian Cafe, this upscale coffee shop downtown that I probably couldn't afford, nursing a single cup of coffee while frantically applying for jobs online. The Wi-Fi was free, the atmosphere was quiet, and honestly, it felt good to pretend I belonged somewhere nice for a few hours. I was deep into crafting yet another cover letter when the entire energy of the cafe shifted. She walked in like she owned the place. Brittany Whitman, though I didn't know her name then, swept through the door with her perfectly blown-out platinum hair, designer everything, and an entourage of equally polished women trailing behind her like expensive accessories. The baristas immediately straightened up. The manager rushed over with a smile so wide it looked painful. And even other customers turned to stare. This was someone important, someone with power, someone who expected the world to revolve around her. I tried to focus on my laptop screen, but it was impossible to ignore the commotion. She was loud, demanding, and treating the staff like they were invisible. "I want my usual table cleaned again," she announced to no one in particular. "And make sure you use the good sanitizer this time. I can't afford to get sick before the charity gala this weekend." I rolled my eyes and went back to my job applications, but fate had other plans. As I reached for my coffee cup, my elbow caught the edge of my laptop, and everything happened in slow motion. The cup tipped, coffee splashed across my keyboard, and in my panic to save my computer, I knocked over my chair and stumbled backward, straight into her. The collision was gentle, barely more than a brush, but it was enough to make her stumble slightly, and a few drops of my spilled coffee landed on what I would later learn was a $5,000 handbag. The cafe went silent, dead silent, like everyone collectively held their breath, waiting for the explosion that was about to come. "Are you kidding me right now?" Her voice was ice-cold fury, wrapped in a perfectly modulated tone. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" I was mortified, absolutely mortified. "I am so sorry," I said immediately, reaching for napkins. "Please, let me clean that up. I'll pay for any cleaning costs, I promise." But she stepped away from me like I was contagious. "Don't you dare touch me," she hissed, and there was something in her voice, something sharp and ugly, that made my skin crawl. "This bag costs more than you make in 6 months, assuming someone would even hire you." The comment hit me like a slap, but I kept trying to apologize. "Please, I'm really sorry. It was completely an accident. If you tell me how much the cleaning costs, I'll find a way to pay for it." That's when her mask completely slipped. Her eyes narrowed, and she looked me up and down with such disgust that I actually took a step back. "People like you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "always think you can just waltz into places where you don't belong and cause problems. For people who actually matter." The words hung in the air like poison. "People like you." Everyone in the cafe knew exactly what she meant, and the shame burned through my chest like acid. But I held my head high, grabbed my damaged laptop, and walked out of there with whatever dignity I had left. If I had known that moment would set off a chain reaction that would nearly destroy my life, maybe I would have fought back right then and there. But sometimes we don't realize we're in a war until the enemy has already fired the first shot. Within hours, I discovered just how much power Brittany Whitman wielded. Her Instagram account had over 2 million followers, and by that evening, she had posted a carefully crafted story about being assaulted by an aggressive individual at her favorite cafe. She didn't mention race directly. She was too smart for that. But the implications were crystal clear in every word choice, every strategic pause in her story videos. The post went viral overnight. Coffeegate started trending, and suddenly, I wasn't just Violet Chen, unemployed software engineer. I was the villain in a story being told to millions of people. My LinkedIn profile was flooded with hateful messages. My phone rang constantly with unknown numbers. Someone had managed to find my address and posted it online with the suggestion that I needed to learn some manners. But that was just the beginning. Within a week, job interviews I had been excited about were mysteriously canceled. Companies that had seemed interested in my portfolio suddenly went radio silent. I started getting rejection emails that were colder and shorter than usual. And when I reached out to my network for help, the responses I got were uncomfortable and evasive. It took me 2 weeks to realize what was happening. Brittany hadn't just destroyed my reputation publicly. She was systematically dismantling my life behind the scenes. Her father, I learned through some painful internet detective work, sat on the boards of several major tech companies. Her social circle included the wives and daughters of CEOs, investors, and hiring managers across the city. One viral post had turned me into a liability that no one wanted to touch. The harassment escalated from there. She started showing up at places I frequented, the grocery store, the library, even the community center, where I went to use the free Wi-Fi when my internet got cut off. Each encounter was filmed and posted, with her playing the victim of my stalking and harassment. Her followers ate it up, creating elaborate theories about my motivations and calling for companies to blacklist me permanently. I stopped leaving my apartment unless absolutely necessary. My savings dwindled to nothing. My landlord, who had always been reasonable before, suddenly became aggressive about late fees and started threatening eviction. I later found out his wife was a regular at the same yoga studio as Brittany's crowd. The lowest point came about 6 weeks after the coffee incident. I was at the unemployment office, swallowing my pride to apply for assistance, when she walked in with a camera crew for what she claimed was a documentary about urban poverty. The timing couldn't have been a coincidence. She made sure to get me in the background of her shots, painting a picture of lazy people taking advantage of the system while she played the concerned philanthropist. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. But something deep inside me refused to break completely. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was survival instinct. But I kept going. I kept applying for jobs, kept trying to rebuild my reputation, kept believing that eventually the truth would matter more than her lies. What I didn't know was that someone had been watching this entire nightmare unfold. Someone with more power than Brittany could ever imagine. Daniel Morrison was the kind of billionaire who preferred to fly under the radar. While other tech moguls courted publicity and built personal brands, Daniel focused on his company and let his work speak for itself. Morrison Industries was the empire built on innovative software solutions, and Daniel had earned his fortune by being smarter, more ethical, and more strategic than his competitors. He had been engaged to Brittany for 8 months, though he was beginning to realize he didn't actually know the woman he had proposed to. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of charity galas, society events, and carefully orchestrated photo opportunities. She was beautiful, charming in public, and seemed to share his interest in philanthropy. But lately, something had been bothering him about the way she treated people when she thought no one important was watching. The coffee shop incident was the first crack in the facade. Daniel had been across the street at his lawyer's office when he saw the commotion through the window. He watched me stumble into Brittany, saw my immediate remorse and attempts to make things right, and witnessed her completely disproportionate reaction. Something about the whole scene didn't sit right with him. When Brittany came home that night, ranting about being attacked by some aggressive person. Daniel asked gentle questions about what happened. The story she told him was dramatically different from what he had observed, and the inconsistencies nagged at him. Over the following weeks, as Brittany's campaign against me intensified, Daniel started paying closer attention. He was disturbed by the viciousness of her social media posts, the calculated way she mobilized her followers, and the obvious satisfaction she took in destroying someone who had clearly meant no harm. He started conducting his own quiet investigation. As the CEO of a major tech company, Daniel had resources that most people could only dream of. He pulled security footage from various locations where Brittany claimed I had harassed her, interviewed business owners and staff members who had witnessed our encounters, and even hired a private investigator to look into my background. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Every single one of Brittany's claims was either exaggerated, manipulated, or outright fabricated. The security footage showed me going about my business normally while she orchestrated elaborate scenes designed to make me look threatening. Business owners described me as polite and respectful, even when clearly under stress. The private investigator found a long history of academic excellence, professional achievements, and volunteer work that painted a picture of someone with strong moral character. But more disturbing was what Daniel learned about Brittany's past. This wasn't her first rodeo. The investigator uncovered a pattern going back years. Other people whose lives had been destroyed by Brittany's campaigns. Other careers ruined by her influence. Other human beings discarded when they stopped being useful or dared to inconvenience her in some small way. She had been using Daniel's name and resources to fuel her vendettas. Companies had blacklisted me, not just because of her social media influence, but because word had gotten out that Daniel Morrison's fiancée had been wronged by me. His reputation, built over decades of hard work and ethical business practices, was being weaponized to destroy an innocent person. The revelation that hurt the most was discovering my professional background. Violet Chen wasn't just some random person who had spilled coffee on his fiancée. She was the brilliant mind behind 3 revolutionary software patents that Daniel's team had been trying to license for months. She was exactly the kind of innovative thinker he had built his company to support and nurture. And his fiancée had been systematically trying to destroy her. Daniel spent sleepless nights wrestling with what to do. He could confront Brittany privately, but he knew she would just become more careful about hiding her cruelty. He could break up with her quietly, but that wouldn't undo the damage she had caused to my life. Whatever he did, it had to be decisive, public, and designed to restore the reputation she had worked so hard to destroy. The solution came to him during a board meeting, when his head of HR mentioned they were still looking for a new chief technology officer. They needed someone with vision, integrity, and the technical skills to lead the company into the next phase of growth. They needed someone exactly like me. But first, he needed to see how I handled myself in person, away from Brittany's manufactured drama. He arranged for both of us to be invited to the Morrison Industries annual charity gala, one of the biggest social events of the year. I received a mysterious invitation with a note saying I had been nominated by a colleague for my contributions to open-source software development. I almost didn't go. By this point, I had been living on ramen noodles and food bank donations for weeks. I certainly didn't have anything appropriate to wear to a Billionaire's charity gala, but something about the invitation intrigued me, and a friend offered to lend me a dress and drive me to the event. Walking into that ballroom was like entering another world. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, waiters carrying trays of champagne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I felt completely out of place. But I was determined to make the most of the opportunity. Maybe I could network, make connections, find someone willing to give me a chance, despite the cloud hanging over my reputation. I had been there for about an hour, nursing a single glass of wine and having polite conversations with people who clearly had no idea who I was, when I saw her across the room. Brittany was holding court near the main stage, resplendent in a gown that probably cost more than a car, surrounded by admirers and photographers. She was in her element, the queen bee of high society, and for a moment I considered leaving before she noticed me. But then something interesting happened. I watched her interact with the catering staff, and the mask slipped again. When a young server accidentally brushed against her dress while refilling her champagne, Brittany's expression turned vicious. She berated him loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, making comments about his competence and professionalism that were completely uncalled for. The kid couldn't have been more than 18, and I watched his face crumble with embarrassment and shame. I couldn't stand it. Despite everything Brittany had done to me, despite the risk of creating another incident that she could twist against me, I walked over to that young man after she moved on and told him he was doing a great job. I helped him clean up the minor spill that had caused her outburst, and I made sure he knew that her behavior wasn't a reflection of his worth as a person. What I didn't know was that Daniel Morrison had been watching the entire interaction. He had positioned himself strategically across the room, observing both Brittany and me throughout the evening. He watched her perform for the cameras and donors while treating service staff like they were beneath her notice. And he watched me go out of my way to show kindness to people who couldn't do anything for me, professionally or socially. The contrast was stark and undeniable. As the evening wound down, Daniel made his move. He approached the microphone on the main stage and asked for everyone's attention. The room fell silent as he began to speak about the importance of character, integrity, and treating all people with dignity, regardless of their position in life. Then he looked directly at Brittany and said, "I have learned recently that someone very close to me has been using my name and influence to cause harm to innocent people. This behavior is antithetical to everything I believe in and everything this company stands for." The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Brittany's face went white as she realized what was happening. Effective immediately, Daniel continued, "My engagement to Brittany Whitman is over. I will not be associated with anyone who uses power as a weapon against those who cannot defend themselves." But he wasn't done. He looked around the rooms until his eyes found me, standing frozen in shock near the back wall. "Violet Chen," he said, and I thought my heart was going to stop beating. "Would you please join me on stage?" The walk to the front of that ballroom was the longest of my life. Every eye in the room was on me. Cameras were flashing, and I could hear whispers rippling through the crowd. When I reached the stage, Daniel handed me the microphone and said quietly, "Tell them what really happened." So I did. Standing in front of 300 of the city's most powerful people, I told the truth about that day in the coffee shop. I talked about the systematic harassment that followed, the destroyed job opportunities, the financial devastation that Brittany had orchestrated for her own entertainment. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. When I finished, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then someone in the crowd started clapping. Others joined in, and soon the entire ballroom was applauding. But the most satisfying moment was watching Brittany's face as her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. She tried to salvage the situation, grabbing another microphone and launching into a defense that was equal parts denial, victim playing, and attack on my credibility. But the damage was done. Too many people had witnessed her behavior throughout the evening. Too many people had seen the evidence Daniel presented, and too many people were tired of her using their social circle to fuel her personal vendettas. Security escorted her out as she screamed threats and accusations, promising lawsuits and revenge. The video of her meltdown was posted online within minutes, and by morning, it had gone more viral than any of her previous posts. But this time, she was the villain of her own story. Daniel offered me a job that night, Chief Technology Officer of Morrison Industries, with a salary that was more than I had ever dreamed of earning. But here's the twist that no one saw coming, not even Daniel himself. 3 days later, As I was reviewing the contract and meeting with the company's legal team, something extraordinary was revealed. Those 3 software patents that Daniel's team had been trying to license, the ones that my previous employer had claimed ownership of when they laid me off. It turns out the rights had reverted back to me due to a clause I had insisted on including in my original employment contract. Those patents weren't just valuable, they were revolutionary. The technology I had developed was exactly what Morrison Industries needed to dominate their market for the next decade. Daniel hadn't just been offering me a job out of guilt or sympathy. He had been trying to hire the person who held the keys to his company's future. But here's where the story takes another turn. During our negotiations, I made Daniel an offer he wasn't expecting. Instead of licensing the patents to his company, I proposed a partnership. I would contribute the patents in exchange for a 40% stake in Morrison Industries, making me not just an employee, but a co-owner of one of the most successful tech companies in the world. Daniel could have said no. He could have tried to negotiate for a smaller percentage or found another way to access the technology. But he recognized that I had earned this opportunity through merit, innovation, and perseverance in the face of incredible adversity. He said yes. 6 months later, I was sitting in that same coffee shop where it all began. But everything had changed. I wasn't hunched over a dying laptop, desperately applying for jobs. I was reviewing quarterly reports that showed Morrison Industries had increased profits by 60% since implementing my patents. I was wearing a suit that actually fit properly, carrying a phone that didn't have a cracked screen, and living in an apartment that had reliable heat and internet. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money or the success. It was what happened when I saw someone else being mistreated by an entitled customer who thought their wealth gave them the right to abuse service workers. This time, I had the power to do something about it. This time, I could step in and make it clear that such behavior wasn't acceptable. This time, I could use my influence to protect someone else who couldn't protect themselves. As for Brittany, karma had its own plans for her. The viral video of her meltdown led to investigations into her other campaigns of harassment. Victims came forward with their own stories, and her social media empire collapsed as sponsors fled and followers abandoned her. She tried to rebuild her brand several times, but the internet has a long memory when it comes to people who abuse their power. The last I heard, she was working at a mid-level marketing firm, trying to keep a low profile and rebuild her reputation. I don't take any pleasure in her downfall. I truly believe that people can change and grow from their mistakes, but I also believe in consequences. And sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales in ways we never could have imagined. This story proves that no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, character always wins in the end. If this story inspired you or reminded you that karma is real, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories where justice prevails. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them. What do you think? Do you believe people like Brittany always get what's coming to them? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, you never know who's watching when you think nobody important is around. Sometimes the person you least expect holds the keys to your future or your downfall. Sometimes the victim you're trying to destroy might just be the person who ends up owning the company you thought belonged to you.